She stood in the doorway that night like she was deciding whether to strike or spare a wounded animal. Her coat was still on, scarf hanging loose, makeup untouched by the rain outside. I had been sitting at the edge of the couch, laptop open, our company's financial dashboard glowing quietly in the dark. A simple transfer alert had pinged 10 minutes earlier, one I did not authorize. I had not confronted her immediately. Instead, I watched her, waiting to see if her face would give anything away. It did not. "You want to be a man about this." Her voice was cool, measured, like a therapist diagnosing me from across the room. "Then be a man and stay." Then she walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge like we were not on the edge of something permanent. Like that line was not loaded with quiet violence. I stayed still. I let the silence stretch. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I already knew, or rather, I already suspected. The real question was how far she had taken it. That alert was not the first anomaly. I had seen two other transfers the previous week, small enough to fly under the radar unless you were watching, but patterned, precise. Today's alert crossed a threshold, enough to activate the internal fraud system on the company account. She would not know that unless she had coded it herself, and she had not. I waited until she was upstairs before I started digging. It was not difficult. Travel bag tucked behind the furnace in the basement held flash drives, labeled even. One was titled Exit Strategy Final. She had planned for failure with the same attention to detail she once brought to our wedding spreadsheets. The files opened quickly. Legal correspondence, drafts of emails, documents with forged versions of my signature. There was a full business transition plan, ownership being quietly shifted through a chain of LLCs that led, eventually, to her. I recognized the formatting. She had used one of my old templates. There were no photos of them together, no love notes, just cold architecture. Still, the emotional betrayal was there in the meticulous planning, the assumption that I would not notice until it was too late, that I would sit there and take it like a good man was supposed to. The next morning she made coffee like nothing had changed. "Did you sleep?" she asked, pouring 2 cups, sliding one across the counter without looking up. I took it, nodding once. "Yeah." "Thought about work?" She sipped quietly, checking her phone. "You always do." I watched her thumb move across the screen, no flicker of hesitation. If she was nervous, she buried it deep. I admired that almost, the commitment to the performance. I did not tell her I had cloned her phone during the night. It was not hard. She always left it on the charger in the kitchen while she showered. I had software I used for corporate security tests installed in under 2 minutes, synced in under 5. By noon, I had access to the full text chain with someone saved under the name R. I read in silence, professional at first, then warmer, then transactional. "I do not think he knows yet. I will keep the pressure on. He believes loyalty is a given, that is his weakness." There was nothing romantic in it, not even lust. It was a conversation between two people building a trap. Every line was bricks and mortar. I was the floor they were standing on. That night we had dinner like we always did. Chicken, rice, a salad she barely touched. She asked about a proposal I had sent out. I told her it had been approved. She smiled, raised her glass to toast, then dropped her eyes to her plate. I raised mine in return, not because I felt like celebrating, but because I wanted her to feel safe. I needed her to believe the illusion held. If she thought I had doubts, she might accelerate. If she felt secure, she would get careless. That night I lay beside her and kept breathing like I used to, slow, even, shoulders relaxed. I had learned how to mimic sleep during my first serious business audit. You never show tension until you are ready to strike. In the dark, she whispered, "I know things have been hard, but I still believe in us." I wanted to ask what version of us she believed in. The paper one she had drafted with lawyers. The company shell she was building in my name. Instead, I reached over and brushed my fingers against hers. She squeezed back. I already had everything I needed, but I wanted more. I wanted to understand how deep it went. Who else knew? How long this had been rehearsed? Because I was not going to confront her in anger. I was not going to beg, plead, or raise my voice. I was going to build my own exit, one that would leave her standing alone in the ashes of the life she had planned to steal. And I was going to do it while she still thought she was winning. By Wednesday, I knew 3 names in one bank. The emails she thought were private were all mirrored to my secure device. R turned out to be Ryan Kessler, my co-founder, someone I had recruited straight out of grad school, brilliant with spreadsheets, terrible with people. He used to joke that I was the face and he was the code. I stopped laughing at that joke 2 years ago. The second name was more intimate, her sister Megan. I found threads between them that made my hands shake, not because they were cruel but because they were surgical. Megan was the architect of tone. Frame it like he's overworked. Make him sound cold but exhausted. That plays better than angry. They were staging a narrative, rehearsing lines like it was a play they intended to sell to every mutual friend we had. The third name hit differently. Eric Marino, my attorney. He was not part of the plot, not knowingly. But he had answered a handful of calls from an anonymous number that traced back to a prepaid line. I recognized the voicemail transcription she had sent to Ryan. He said the restructure would be risky unless he, meaning me, was willing to sign certain waivers. But once that's done, it's legally sound. They were trying to move pieces around me while keeping me in place long enough to validate the entire thing with my own signature. It was not betrayal in the form of deception. It was betrayal in the form of quiet substitution. She wanted me to think I was still in control until the only thing left with my name on it was the liability. At home, everything remained perfectly functional. She made plans for the weekend. She joked about a new Netflix show. She reached for my hand in the car. Each move perfectly timed, perfectly normal. That night, as we brushed our teeth side by side, she glanced over at me through the mirror. "You have been quiet lately," she said, not accusing, not concerned, just curious. I rinsed my mouth, wiped my face with a towel, and leaned against the counter, trying to stay focused, a lot on my mind. She nodded like that made sense. "I get that. We are almost through it, right?" She meant the rough patch, or maybe she meant the play. Either way, I smiled and said, "Almost." The next morning, I met with a private security consultant, not one who handled threats, but one who specialized in corporate infiltration. His job was to test vulnerabilities in business structures, in legal shells, in trust funds. I handed him a flash drive and watched his eyes narrow as he scanned the file names. "Who built this?" he asked. "My wife," I said, keeping my voice even. He leaned back, nodding slowly. "This is sophisticated. It is not just personal, it is tactical. I need to flip it," he smiled. "Then we will flip it." By Friday, we had duplicated every asset she had touched. By Saturday, I had opened a shell corporation in Delaware using the exact same structure, only with a fail-safe redirect. If she triggered the separation documents, the shell would absorb the disputed assets automatically, under my control, fully legal and completely invisible unless you knew what to look for. I did not sleep much that weekend. Not because I was afraid. I was thinking about the toast she had raised, the way her fingers tightened around mine when I played the role she needed. It would have been easier if she had screamed, cheated, broken something. But this calm, premeditated erosion was harder to forgive. The turning point came the following Tuesday. I received a call from a journalist I knew professionally, someone who owed me a favor. "Off the record," he said, his voice low. "There is a quiet tip coming through legal channels. Someone is floating a story about financial misconduct at your firm, internal strife, misuse of funds." I felt my pulse harden, but my voice stayed flat. "You know who?" There was a pause, then, "Your name is not in it yet, but it is designed to push you out without ever mentioning you. One of the parties has a prepared statement ready to go, claiming emotional coercion and financial overreach." I thanked him and hung up. That night I came home late. She was curled on the couch, wine in hand, watching a show I used to love. She muted it when I entered. "Long day?" she asked. I nodded, sat across from her, met her gaze. "I got a call from a reporter," I said. "Said there's a leak coming from inside the company." Her eyes flicked once to the glass, then back. "Seriously, who would do that?" She sounded surprised, not shaken. She was testing the ground. I kept my expression neutral. "That is what I intend to find out." She leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know I would never," I cut her off gently. "I know." And I did. I knew exactly what she was doing, and I had already started turning the trap back around. The next step would be timing. She thought she had built a machine to eject me. What she did not realize was that I had already crawled inside it, rewired the core, and left her standing on a platform that was about to vanish. She wanted me to be a man and stay. I was going to be one. just not the kind she could control. 3 days after the call from the reporter, the wire transfer she had been waiting for bounced. The redirected trust, hers on paper, mine in practice, rejected the deposit automatically. She would not notice it immediately, not until her accountant flagged the freeze. That gave me a window. Ryan was still showing up to the office, pretending nothing was shifting under his feet. I let him. I wanted to see how far he would push the performance. It was almost comical, his sudden uptick in collaborative initiatives, the sudden urgency in consolidating minor departments. He was trying to sweep the path before the kill shot, but he did not realize the plan had already failed before it launched. My consultant had traced his communications. He had been forwarding confidential board documents to a personal server, enough to constitute breach of contract, potentially enough for civil litigation. I filed the evidence quietly through our legal team, independent counsel, pre-cleared, unconnected to Eric Marino. Marino, for his part, had been contacted again by the same anonymous number. This time I intercepted the call via a clone redirect. The voice on the other end was not hers, it was Megan's. "I just want to make sure everything's ready," she said, smooth and rehearsed. "He's under pressure. We need to move soon." Eric hesitated, then said, "If you're not representing the client directly, I cannot legally." She cut the call. It was enough. That evening I stood outside my own house for nearly 20 minutes. The lights were on in the living room. Through the window I could see her silhouette. She was talking on the phone, pacing slowly, one hand to her temple, probably complaining about me to someone who still believed her version. I wondered what she had said about our last weekend away. About the time she had cried in the middle of the parking lot after a dinner in Vermont, telling me she felt invisible. I had believed her then, pulled her close, promised I would do better. The irony now felt surgical. When I finally entered, she turned quickly, surprised. Her phone disappeared into her pocket. "Hey, everything okay?" Her tone was soft, worried. She was good at that, using concern as a mask for calculation. I dropped my keys, took off my jacket, and walked past her. "I'm starving," I said. "Did you eat?" She nodded. "There's leftovers." I reheated the pasta she had made and ate standing at the counter while she sat at the kitchen table watching me. After a long pause, she tried again. "You've been distant lately. Is it work?" I looked up from the plate and met her gaze. "I suppose I've just been thinking more clearly," she frowned. "About us." I let that land in the silence. I watched her squirm, not visibly, not theatrically, but subtly. A shift in posture. A flick of the wrist. That was the moment she began to worry. The next morning she found the first lock changed, just one. The small drawer in my home office where I kept sensitive files. She never asked why, I never offered. She started watching me after that, in small ways, checking the mail before I could, glancing at my laptop when she thought I would not notice. She was trying to get ahead of a threat she had not yet identified, but the threat had already passed her. I was no longer reacting. I was waiting. By Friday, the shell company I created had successfully absorbed the disputed assets. Every transaction she had initiated now pinged a notice to my account. When she called her accountant in a panic that afternoon, I received the transcript. "There's been a mistake," she said tightly. "We had this secured." He responded with a single line that I read 4 times over. "The name on the redirect is his. You never had full control." That evening, she lit candles. Made her mother's recipe for lentil stew. Wore the cardigan I once told her made her look dangerous in the best way. She was reactivating the relationship script, trying to stabilize the ground by walking back through memory. I ate in silence. "You remember that trip to the coast?" she asked, smiling faintly. "You made me that playlist, the one with the old jazz tracks." I nodded. "You liked the Brubeck one, kept making me replay it." She laughed, the sound delicate, practiced. "It still makes me think of you." I let her have that moment. I did not rob her of it, not because I felt sentimental, but because I wanted her to keep building the illusion she was safe, because safety invites confession. She cleared the plates, brought 2 glasses of wine to the couch, sat beside me. "I know I have not been perfect," she said slowly, curling her legs beneath her. "And I know I've miscalculated, but I want you to know I never stopped caring. I thought maybe we could start from scratch, maybe just get back to who we were." I turned slightly toward her, my expression carefully unreadable. "Who exactly were we?" I asked. She looked down, ran a finger along the rim of her glass. "People who had each other's backs, who built something real." I watched her for another moment. Then I stood up, set the untouched glass down, and walked to the window. She did not follow because she was beginning to realize I was no longer acting. I had stopped playing her game. I was not distant, I was done. She was losing control. It showed in her posture, shoulders tighter, speech clipped in ways she could not smooth over. The next week she began initiating conversations with too much warmth, too much precision, as if she had started rehearsing kindness the same way she had rehearsed her betrayal. On Thursday afternoon I scheduled a dinner. Just the three of us, her, Ryan, and me. I sent the invitation through a neutral shared calendar entry with a vague title, Q3 Transition Sync. No reason to raise alarms. No hint at what was coming. She asked about it that morning. "This dinner, what's it about?" I shrugged while adjusting my tie. "New legal structures, consolidation, just a few clarifications." She nodded, but her mouth was tight. She knew something was coming. She just did not know the shape of it. The restaurant I chose was one we used for business development meetings, expensive enough to feel official, discreet enough to avoid attention. I arrived early and requested the private booth in the back. Tucked beneath the table was a secure recorder, pre-approved by legal. The entire booth was swept for privacy 2 hours earlier. Ryan arrived first. He looked tense, like someone expecting an ambush but still hoping for a truce. He tried to mask it behind his usual arrogance. "Appreciate you calling this. I know things have been layered lately," he said as he slid into the booth. I gave a polite nod, poured water for both of us. "Nothing we cannot unlayer, we just need clarity." She arrived 7 minutes late, perfectly timed, not too early, not late enough to insult. She wore dark gray, her negotiation color, serious, composed, neutral. She smiled like it was all routine. "I hope this is not a firing line," she said lightly as she took her seat. "No," I said evenly. "Nothing that dramatic." We ordered quickly. Wine for them, soda water for me. I wanted my clarity clean. I opened the conversation with data, repositioning of LLC holdings, adjustments to distribution rights, minor internal restructuring, each point just formal enough to seem like routine business. Ryan nodded along, trying not to sweat. She smiled less as I continued. Then I asked the question that reset the air. "Do either of you want to disclose anything about the pending restructuring?" Her glass paused midair. Ryan cleared his throat. "Not sure what you're implying," he said. I leaned back, let silence settle like dust. "I'm implying that I know," I said. "The shell companies, the draft statements, the manipulated equity reports." Ryan's face darkened. She looked at me carefully. "You went through my files," she said. Her tone was wounded, but her eyes were sharp. "No," I said calmly. "Your files went through me, you just did not realize it." They glanced at each other. Brief. Involuntary, a crack in the script. "You have no idea what this is really about," Ryan said, but there was no force behind it. "I do," I said. "It is about leverage, reputation, power, and neither of you has it anymore." The recorder beneath the table captured everything, every word, every defensive pivot, every half-confession disguised as self-justification. Ryan tried to suggest that it was a safety net. She framed it as contingency planning. I let them talk. At one point she said, "We were not going to destroy you, just realign things." I smiled faintly. "By erasing me from my own company." Silence. Then Ryan said the line I had been waiting for. "It was not supposed to go this far. She said you would roll over, that you always bend when pushed." I let that hang in the air, let the betrayal have its full weight. When the check came, I paid without a word. She followed me out to the street. Ryan stayed behind, either ashamed or calculating, probably both. "I was trying to survive," she said once we were out of earshot. I stopped on the sidewalk, turned toward her. "No, you were trying to win." Her voice softened. "You said once that you respected strategy." "I do," I replied. "That is why I never show my hand until the table is cleared." She opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already walking away. The recorder was in my pocket. The lawsuit would be filed the next morning. Her name and Ryan's would be attached to a fraud complaint, complete with timestamps, emails, and audio. She had wanted me to be a man and stay. She would now learn what that truly meant. The complaint landed on her desk at 9:12 a.m., hand-delivered by a legal courier wearing mirrored sunglasses and an unbothered expression. I had been copied on the receipt confirmation. She would open it in the home office. sitting in the same chair where she had planned my removal. Ryan received his copy 38 minutes later. He attempted to call me twice. I declined both calls. By noon, the fallout had begun. Internal counsel scheduled an emergency board meeting. The investigation team locked Ryan out of company servers. Every transfer he had initiated was under audit. By 2:00 p.m., he had been suspended pending review with formal charges for breach of fiduciary duty being prepared. She texted me once, "Please come home. We need to talk." I read it. Then I opened the secondary feed that synced to her personal notes. A habit she had started years ago, drafting what she could not say out loud. There was a new file titled "What to Say If He Knows." I read it slowly. She had scripted the conversation in 3 acts: apology, vulnerability, shared blame. There were cues for crying, space for "I still love you." I closed the app and powered off the feed. Her strategy had not ended. It had just changed its costume. That evening I returned to the house at dusk. I did not announce myself. She was in the kitchen setting 2 plates on the table. The candles were already lit. Jazz played softly from her phone, Brubeck of course. She turned when she heard me enter, forcing a smile that had cracked edges. "I made dinner," she said. "Figured we could sit down, start from something real." I looked at the table, then back at her. "Real?" she swallowed. "I mean, us. What we've been, what we could still be." I stepped further in, not sitting. "Do you remember telling me to be a man and stay?" She paused. "I was angry. It was a bad night." I nodded. "It was, and you were not wrong. I was trying to hold everything together back then. I thought if I just waited it would settle." Her voice softened. "It still can." "No," I said evenly. "Because what you built was not something broken. It was something hollow, and I see it now." She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "You do not have to ruin me." I met her eyes without flinching. "You tried to erase me first. Everything since has been damage control." She hesitated. "What if I step away? What if I give it all back?" "You cannot give back what you never truly had," I said. "It is already being undone." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. She looked down, pressed her hands flat against the countertop. Her breathing quickened. For the first time her posture broke. "I was scared," she whispered. "Said you would take everything from me if it came to a legal battle." I watched her carefully. "And you believed him?" She looked up, eyes rimmed with something close to tears. "Because you always play the long game. I thought, if I got there first, you would win." She nodded slowly. "I stood in that room, the same space where we once celebrated signing our first major client, where she had once surprised me with champagne and a paper crown." The memories felt distant now, like objects seen underwater. "I am not staying," I said finally. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again there was no more performance, only fatigue. "Then say it plain," she murmured. "Say it like a man." I took a step back. My voice was quiet, cert. "I already did." I turned and left the kitchen. I did not slam the door. I did not look back. There were no second drafts coming. The house was no longer mine in any way that mattered. I left with only what was essential: documents, digital backups, 1 travel bag with clothes and hardware. Everything else had already been emotionally disconnected. Her face, her voice, even the echo of our laughter in that hallway closet where we once argued over paint swatches, all of it had been rewritten. 2 days after I walked out, her attorney reached out through a third party. Not Marino. He had recused himself after I submitted evidence of her manipulation. This new attorney asked for terms of discussion. I offered none. By then, the board had already voted to remove Ryan entirely. The formal cause: breach of contract, conflict of interest, willful misdirection of resources. His severance was voided. His professional reputation collapsed completely in under 48 hours. Her circle of support began to fray quickly. Megan, ever pragmatic, stopped returning her calls once her own involvement was subpoenaed. Friends who had reposted her curated photos of romantic dinners and strong woman energy went silent once the legal filings surfaced. Screenshots had a way of drying up sympathy. Her statement to the public, ghostwritten and toothless, attempted to reposition the events as a miscommunication exacerbated by internal pressures. But nobody believed it. Not after the document trail went public. Not after the recordings. I kept my statement simple, factual, unemotional. I take seriously the responsibility of protecting the company and its people. Any actions taken were in pursuit of that duty. That was it. No blame, no adjectives. She called me once more after that, blocked number. I picked up without speaking. Her voice was thin, raw. You really would have stayed, wouldn't you, if I had not pushed? I let the silence hang. She was not owed comfort, but I would give her clarity. I wanted to, I said, until I saw what staying actually meant. There was a pause. She was crying, but she tried to mask it with steady breath. I did love you, she whispered. I said nothing. Not because I doubted it, but because it no longer mattered. The next hearing finalized asset separation. Her fabricated trust had collapsed under scrutiny. The shell company I created absorbed everything she had tried to reroute. She retained only her personal savings and a small consultancy she had quietly launched under Ryan's name. It was enough to live on. Barely. She had no legal ground left to challenge the outcome, no leverage, no remaining allies willing to vouch for her credibility. The final encounter happened in a lobby, neutral territory. She was coming out of a meeting with her attorney. I was walking in to finalize a transition clause. She stopped when she saw me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She stepped forward. I do not hate you, she said quietly. I believe that, I replied. I just thought you would forgive me eventually. I shook my head, not cruelly, just clearly. Forgiveness is not the same thing as return. She looked older somehow, like the scaffolding had finally dropped and she had to stand alone in her own weather. She reached out, almost touched my arm, then pulled back. I never thought you would be the one to walk away. I met her eyes one last time. That was your mistake. Then I walked past her. I did not look back. I moved into a place that did not look like anything we had ever shared. Sparse furniture. No curated bookshelf. No scented candles placed at a 30-degree angle. The windows faced west, which meant sunsets bled into the room like quiet reminders that endings could still look beautiful. I did not celebrate. There was no moment where I popped a cork or leaned against the door frame with satisfaction. That was not the kind of victory this was. It had been too surgical, too costly. The house was sold. Her name removed from every contract, every title, every standing agreement. What remained between us existed only in court records and occasional forwarded emails from attorneys. She had stopped calling. Her final message was a single sentence. I see now. I never responded. There were days I missed the version of her that never existed, the partner I thought I had, the late-night collaborator, the woman who once fell asleep on my chest after our first product launch with a mouthful of pizza and a to-do list still scribbled on her palm. That version was never real. That did not stop the memory from returning uninvited. I stayed busy, consulted on a few projects, took long walks in neighborhoods that held no shared memories. I kept my head down until the silence started sounding less like punishment and more like privacy. Friends who had distanced themselves quietly reached back out. I did not rush to meet them. Trust, once frayed, did not restitch itself with apologies and drinks. One of them, an old colleague, sent a message that stuck with me. She was building a story, you built a system. Systems win. He was right, but it did not feel like a win. It felt like survival with intention. She had been forced to leave the city, too many burned bridges. Her consulting attempts had fizzled after legal pressure mounted from clients who wanted nothing to do with the scandal. Ryan left town quietly. Last I heard, he was living off savings in another state. No one was calling him brilliant anymore. There were moments I thought about what it would have meant to stay, to forgive, to believe the sob story she had rehearsed, to let her rebuild her image beside me and pretend it had all been a misunderstanding. But that would have meant losing myself, so I walked away. Not in anger, not with bitterness, with clarity, because being a man does not mean staying where you are told. It means knowing when something can no longer be rebuilt, and having the strength to walk without dragging the wreckage behind you. And that is exactly what I did. I walked away, and I did not take a single piece of her with me.